Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of Artist Spotlight. And I am absolutely delighted to welcome Deepa Balsavar today, on whom we shall shine our spotlight. And I've been waiting for a while for this session. Um, Now, Deepa, in her own words, has written several books and illustrated several books. Um, she has worked in education, creating uh, study kits and learning kits for municipal schools. Um, Her books have been selected by the White Ravens Catalogue, and books like Nani's Walk to the Park, which I call iconic, which is an iconic book now, has won awards and also been honored by the BICW Contemporary Awards. So let me not take any more of your time. I'm going to hand the mic over to Deepa.
So good morning, everyone. I mean, I'm totally chuffed that Lavanya asked me to come on this thing, though frankly, with the wonderful wealth of artists and writers and all that around, I'm a bit stupefied, to be in the spotlight. So these days, my philosophy has been rather to listen rather than talk. But I've been given time to talk about myself today, so I hope I can make it a little bit interesting and share my stuff with all of you. So I will start. Firstly, thank you all for joining me on a Saturday morning. It's fantastic to see so many friends and family there. Hi, Suru. And let me start my journey, get straight into it, and start my journey at the age of about 30, I think. So this was the time that I joined the Avehi-Abacus Project, which is a project that works, it still works with municipal schools. And that was the beginning of the project, right at the beginning when the team was still being formed and we were deciding what should we present. So the team at that time was led by this absolutely fantastic educator called Dr. Shanta Gandhi. She had been director of the National School of Drama. She had been teaching for many years, and she was associated with an organization called Avehi. And her idea was, which was an audio-visual library of material. So now you must remember that this is, we're talking about the around the turn of the 1990s. So we're talking about 89, 90. 1990, at a time when nobody had personal computers and nobody had cell phones, and we were still operating with VHSs. And so the audiovisual library was to provide institutions and individuals with material that they could show in schools and for educational purposes, basically. And Shantaji's vision was that we shouldn't expect people to come to us. We should go to people, and basically we should go to schools. So to develop a school program, which was like a foundation course. And the idea of the foundation course was that it should link all the individual subjects that we learn: history, geography, science, mathematics. How are these connected? And why should we see them as a connected whole? And how do they relate to our lives? Why is it that something that we learn in school should affect us, and should see their connection with the way we live? So it was a big task, but his enthusiasm was always unfailing, totally unflinching. She kept saying, you just train the teachers, you give them the material and they will do it. It was a core team, a small core team at the beginning, which then grew to 6 amazing women. So we were an all-woman team, women who came from different backgrounds. So an actress, a filmmaker, a professional editor, a language writer, and me. I was the visualizer and designer on the team, although all of us were involved in the job of researching and writing, and then our specific tasks took over. So the first material that we developed, we tested out in one municipal school in Mumbai for 5 years. We worked with the same set of students for 5 years. And that was possibly one of the most joyful times of my life, because we would take the sessions in the class, and that municipal school was in a terrible condition. It had no windows. So during the monsoon, everybody had to open umbrellas and sit with the umbrellas over their heads in order to protect themselves from the rain. But the connection that we formed with the children lasted for many, many years until they grew up and had children of their own. I would sometimes, I mean, I had carte blanche to develop materials. So I would be building castles and making 3D objects and all sorts of things. And the children had come to a point where they'd look at me and they'd say, you know, and they'd look at something that I had made and say, "Kya Deepa Didi, time nahi mila kya theek se banane ko?" So it was, I could experiment with anything and everything. Anyway, a lot of that was not replicable. After 5 years, we had various agencies, specifically we had TISS come and do an evaluation of the project. We took on board the suggestions and critiques that they made. The material was revamped. It was made replicable. The sessions were changed in order to make allow the teachers to take them better. And the second version of the material was presented, this time to a larger group, many more schools. At the end of a second period of 5 years, so 10 years altogether, we finally felt, okay, we have enough now experience and we've learned enough to publish this material in a form which we can give out to teachers. And so in about 2000, we launched the material, calling to help us launch it many of the students that we had worked with. The course itself was truncated from a 5-year course to a 3-year course. And I think it's possibly been one of the most satisfying and one of the most educative things that I've been involved in. Educative for me, I learned a hell of a lot. I learned a lot about my craft. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the world we live in. And we fought, we argued, we researched, and what we brought out is now being used in all the upper primary municipal schools in Mumbai, so 905 of them. Subsequent to that, a teachers training course was developed so that teachers could be exposed to the kind of ideas that we were putting in teachers training colleges themselves. And there's been other material. I left the project in 2010, I think, after almost 20 years of working there, because my role had come to an end and I needed to move on to other things. But what I want to share with you first are some of the material that we produced while working at Abacus. So I'm going to share my screen, and fingers crossed everything goes okay, because I'm a firm believer in Murphy's Law. So there it comes. Share. Okay. So this is one of the first stories that was illustrated. Lavanya, I hope everybody can see this. Yeah?
Yes.
Am I screen sharing properly? Yeah, okay, perfect, perfect. So this was a story called Undari Sundari. The story was called Undari Sundari, and it's an old folk tale, and it's about this Undari, who is the daughter of the Mouse King. And of course, the Mouse King is very keen that she marries the most wonderful and nobody is good enough for his daughter. And she's in love with this Ashtam Pashtam invented mouse. And the king feels, no, 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 you're not going to marry him. I'm going to search for the perfect bridegroom for you. So, of course, we all know the story. He goes to the king of the elephants and says, will you marry my daughter? And then the king of the elephants says, but I am not the biggest animal on earth. If you want the greatest animal, you should go to the blue whale. And so the Undir, the mouse king, goes to the sea and calls out to the blue whale, and the blue whale says, but I'm nothing without water. So you should really go to the water. And then the water says, yeah, but I'm driven by the wind. No, was it? No, no, no. Okay, sorry. These two frames have got interchanged a bit. And the water says, but when the sun beats down upon me, I'm not nothing. I evaporate. So you should really go and meet the sun. And the sun says, yes, but when the clouds come, I'm hidden by the clouds, and then nobody can see my face. And the cloud says, but I'm driven away here and there by the wind. I'm at the whim and fancy of the wind. And the wind says, the mountains stop me, so you should go to the mountains. And the mountain says, yes, I was powerful at one time, but do you see that man down there? He's constantly digging away at my base, and he changes the entire landscape. So you want to know who's most powerful? Go to man. And so the mouse king goes to the farmer who's tilling the soil there, and he says, and as he approaches him, the farmer looks at the mouse and runs away. And the mouse says, what are you doing? Why are you going? Where are you going? And the farmer says, don't you know, I'm terrified of you. No matter how hard I work, whatever I store is eaten up by all you mice and rats. So please spare me. And so, of course, the moral of the thing is that nobody is greater and nobody is lesser. And the mouse king comes back and decides that his daughter, his precious daughter, can marry her Ashtam Pashtam inventor boyfriend. So the reason I'm showing you this was when computers were, Photoshop was just introduced. I mean, to us in this, we had been donated a computer, and I was working with our DPT fellow, Mr. Srinivas, and we said, chalo, instead of doing pictures by hand, let's do them on the computer. So I drew outlines and we scanned them and we put them on the computer. And then, of course, we went wild. We said, oh, there's something called embossing. Let's use embossing. Oh my goodness, there's an effect called blur. Let's go to Gaussian blur. And let's go to speckled, and let's go to, so basically here in this picture, I mean, with all these separate frames, and each of these frames is an A3 size one. So this was a flip chart. We went berserk learning about the computer and learning about the techniques that we could apply and what were the possibilities and all that. So as you can see, it looks terribly computer generated. We put dots on the background, and then we decided that the mouse king has to sit on a throne with peanuts. So we rushed down and bought peanuts and washed them, and then opened the shell out. And I don't know how we did. There weren't cell phones, of course, in those days. But we maybe scanned the peanut shell or something and then placed them there. And then his jacket, the king's jacket, we ate toffees. We gave everybody toffees and then scanned the wrapper. So he had a nice shiny vest to wear. But this was our exploration into using the computer and using Photoshop. And it's still something that I delight in, because every time I look at this story, I'm reminded of the absolute sense of joy and discovery that we had while doing this. So we used every single effect that was available. we used everything that we could, and made this Undari Sundari Lagna, it was called. So that was, I'm going to share a few other stories. Of course, over the course of the entire uh, uh, program, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of illustrations. Not only were the session plans illustrated, but in order to get the children to talk, to interact with them, we wanted to make sure that everything was as visual as possible. So there were many, many flip charts that we used and posters that we used. Although I did a lot of them, I have to say that uh, some of the material was done by children's book illustrators who are very famous today, and we got them when they were young. So Priya Kurian has done some material for us in Abacus in those days, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, yeah, at least. Kavita Singh Kale, she's done some work. The absolutely fabulous animator Gitanjali Rao did some work. So I'm grateful to all these. So a lot of these absolutely fabulous illustrators who are known in the world of children's book illustration and all that today, I'm happy to say worked with us in their early days. Gitanjali, of course, was already well known, but Priya and Kavita and quite a few others were very young at that time. And it gives me great pleasure to say that I've seen them grow and I've seen them develop, and I take such great pride in seeing how wonderful they are. Okay, so here's one more thing that I did. This was a poster to understand what happens to garbage. It was in one of the other sessions. As I say, I'm just showing you some random stuff that was developed. So this spoke about how stuff is collected from homes, and uh, it's dumped and then it goes to the dumping site. There are recyclers who recycle the material, who live in awful conditions. The dump trucks come and they drop it on these sites, and scavengers come and have to sort through it. There's no separation done of plastic and biodegradable waste. There are syringes and medical waste that are all chucked there. So I was talking about the importance of recyclers in our lives and how we rarely get to see what happens once the kachra is thrown out of the house. So this was a poster on that garbage. And then similarly, there was a poster that I did on water. Where does our water comes from? So Mumbai's water, of course, and we're talking about Mumbai here. So if there's anybody outside Mumbai, Deepa in Chandigarh, okay, tanks, from storage tanks, it comes to the cities, and the cities are, the buildings are supplied. And at the same time, because of the cutting down of trees, the rainfall decreases in areas where the rain used to fall. Uh, when you don't have a water supply, or when you have just one pipe that supplies an entire shanty or basti, what happens? How is the water distributed? Who gets the water? And how is it used? So in the buildings, big buildings, you may have swimming pools and fountains, and you have water for your cars and whatnot. And in other areas, you have to run after water tanks and walk with handis on your head for kilometers to find water. So this was to get the children to think about water usage and where our water supply comes from. So I just wanted to share those with you. Now I'm going to come to a series of drawings, illustrations that were done for a flip chart on understanding learning disabilities, or understanding disabilities that children have, and what the teacher needs to be aware of. So this next flip chart was done really to be used in the teachers training program. So this first frame, maybe I should reduce them a bit so you can see the entire frame. Yeah, there it is. So this first frame talks about, oops, where have I gone? It's gone somewhere. Ah, there it is. Ah, there it is. So this first frame talks about children who can't see in class. So you always have somebody who's standing up and says, "Kai lile malam hait nai disat nai," uh, and then this girl is telling that boy, "You have to write. You don't have to draw a picture." And some children are having problems. So very often, an eyesight problem is seen as the child not paying attention or not being attentive, or just playing the fool. So we had the situation, and then the medical condition and what needed to be done was explained in the following uh, frame. So that was on eyesight. Then we had something on hearing. So this was the situation when children can't hear and they're sitting very close and they can't repeat what the teacher says. And then this is about what goes wrong, what can go wrong, and understanding the problem of hearing loss or hearing impairment. And this third one was on speech impairment and stuttering and not being able to talk properly. So, and what can be done to help children with such problems? This is the last one, was of course on physical problems that are visible: cerebral palsy, spina bifida, and the need to make sure that all children get help. So as you can see, I must say all these visuals were done at least 20 years ago, and they're still relevant today. I was at that time still developing a style. I was experimenting a lot, and I had fantastic support in order to do so. We spent a lot of time to make sure that whatever visuals were provided and went out to schools were the best that we could provide. So as I say, this was just a small portion of the stuff that we had done. Now, while we were developing, once we had developed all the material, it came to us that there were a lot of stories that we had developed that may find a broader audience. So we submitted some of the stories developed in Abacus to Eklavya and to Tulika. And we said, would you be interested in having a look at some of our material and maybe producing it? Both of them came to meet us. I mean, Radhika came from Chennai to meet us, and I'm not sure who came from Eklavya to meet us, but both of them came and they met us, and we carried things further. And both of them subsequently produced books based on the material that we had developed in Abacus. So I'm going to share with you now two books that were developed in Abacus, which I illustrated, and my colleague Deepa Hari and I, there seem to be a lot of Deepas around. Anyway, Deepa Hari and I, so just to recap, so yes, so I'm going to share a couple of those stories which were finally, which were published by Eklavya. So these are Eklavya stories. This first one is called Who Will Teach Emperor Akbar? And it was a story basically about how we all learn from each other, that there's no one teacher. Everybody we meet knows something that we don't know. So everybody in this world can be a teacher, and everybody by that sense has to be a learner. You only learn when you listen to other people. Hi, Madhu. It is so good to see friends around. Okay, so who would teach Emperor Akbar? For this, I decided that the style should be appropriate to the topic. And I'm not a miniaturist, and I think it's very wrong for us to try and precisely copy a style which is not our own. I can never be a miniaturist, just as I can never be a Gond artist, and I can never be a Wadli. You can do a facsimile of it. But in order for those drawings and illustrations to have relevance, you have to be seeped in that culture, you have to be seeped in that, immersed in that. And sitting in a city, I can't just pretend that, oh, I can do Wadley drawings or I can do bone drawings, although I may be able to do a copy of a drawing done by an artist from there. So, but I decided here I would adapt a sort of miniaturized style for this, and basically the story is about, as I said, Emperor Akbar deciding that he doesn't know enough, and that he needs to learn. So he tells Birbal, after seeing some wise men in discourse, he says, Birbal, I need to start learning. So bring in people who can teach me, bring in tutors for me tomorrow. And the next day, when he goes to the court, he finds that the court is full of people. There are, 1 minute, let me put it a little bit this side. Okay. So there's everybody, half the town is in this. There are farmers and there are businessmen, there are dancers and there are children, there are bricklayers and there are vegetable sellers, there are old people and young people and scribes and soldiers and everybody. And of course, Akbar gets really upset and he said, what the hell have you done? You filled my Darbar hall with half the kingdom. And Birbal says, and Jahanpana, the other half are waiting outside. So, so Akbar says, but what is the meaning of this? And then Birbal says, Your Highness, do you know how to wash clothes? So, so the Emperor Akbar says, then why the hell are you asking me all this? So Birbal says, then, they have something to teach you because you don't know how to do this. So then he says, do you know where to go to get the best price for a product? That is grain, the grain that is grown in this. Do you know how to write a verse so beautiful that it looks like a picture? Do you know how to recycle? Do you know how to grow things? So Birbal says, so basically everybody in the world is a teacher and everybody is a learner. And this is what we need to learn from each everybody. So then Akbar, of course, there has this constant banter with Birbal, and he says, but Birbal, surely nobody can teach you anything, right? I mean, you know everything. And Birbal brings an old woman forward and he says, meet this, she is my first and my best teacher. And this old woman tells Akbar, it's not possible to know everything in the world. I mean, nobody should even attempt to do that. But what we can all do is learn to be good human beings. That is very important. And that's where the story ends. Because then we ask the children, who do you think she is? Because if we say that anybody can be a teacher and anybody is a learner, then this woman could be anybody in your life. She could be a grandmother or a mother or a teacher or a neighbor or somebody who's influenced you greatly. And we leave it up to the children to decide who the old woman is. And the next page has a frame where they draw a person, a teacher, somebody who is influenced and taught them many things. So the second story is called The Sea in a Bucket. So The Sea in a Bucket, again, is a story developed by Abacus, and it talks about the water cycle. And the water cycle and how everything is connected to us. And the water cycle is told through the rhyme. Those of you who've been through an English education like I was, we learned that rhyme, this is the house that Jack built. So the rhyme follows that sort of tune. And it talks about, okay, so this was the cover and the back cover. And this was the end paper, which I absolutely love. So I've included it because I love the end paper of the book. And this story is about Sonu, who sets off to get water. And this is Sonu's bucket. We decided to move out, or rather I decided to move out of Mumbai as my inspiration for this. And this is loosely based on the ups and downs of Darjeeling, a town that I have come to really love due to some other work that I've been doing. And so you'll see a lot of the up and down and the influence of the hills on this book. So there's Sonu who sets out to get water, and there's Sonu and there's his bucket. And can you see the whole picture or can you not see? Oh, okay, here we are. Okay, right. So this is the tap that brings the water to fill Sonu's bucket. And these are the pipes that carry the water that trickles through the tap to fill Sonu's bucket. So as you can see, it's the rhyme that keeps on adding one more thing. And on each page, you can also see the uses of water and how water is used. Now, there's a second side story that's going on along this. While Sonu fills water in his bucket, and while people are running away from baths and asking for water to drink and watering plants and having showers and making tea, there's a little dog who also has a story that goes on along with Sonu. And this dog is filling water from a crack in the pipe. And you will notice this dog on every page as we go along. Then we come to the lake from which the water is brought and the river. And at this stage, if you notice, Sonu has dropped his bucket and the water has all spilt. The dog still has his bucket of water. We go on to follow the journey of the river, and oh, there's one page that's missing. Oh yeah, okay, here it is. It's gone up and down. These are the mountains from where the streams begin, and that's the rain that rains down on the mountains that forms the trickle that becomes streams and becomes the river which flows down to the valley. And there's Sonu with the bucket over his head, protecting himself from the rain. And you can see all my Darjeeling influences here, the llamas and the rhododendrons and the yaks and the zoos and the people climbing mountains. And then, of course, from the rain, we go back to the sun and the sea. And the bucket, Sonu's bucket, is now being used to make a sandcastle. The beautiful dog is still preserving his bucket. So anyway, so that's the entire cycle from the bucket, from the tap, all the way up to the sea. And then we say, so what happened to Sonu's bucket? What happened to the water in Sonu's bucket? Sonu's bucket is, of course, the sea, where the whole cycle begins again. So the nice thing about this poster, this book is at the end, there's a pull-out poster which shows you the entire rain cycle. So you have the sea and the sun, and you have the clouds that form the rain, which rains on the mountains, and then you have the stream and the river, the lakes and the pipes and the taps, so that the children can see the entire rain cycle in one go. I'm rather fond of these large composite pictures that put everything into place, as you will see in a little while when I go to Nani's walk to the park. So I was saying that there's somebody I want to talk about while I'm showing you these two books, but in particular, who very rarely gets mentioned, and that is the designer of the book. The designer very rarely even gets a mention, a name on the book. Is the name here? I can't see it here. Is the name here? So I do the illustrations, right? And the story is written, sometimes by me, sometimes by others, sometimes adapted by me from others. But somebody helps me put this whole thing together. And that's a specialized skill. The books this book, Emperor Akbar Learns a Lesson, Who Will Teach Emperor Akbar, looks the way it looks because of the job of a designer. And in this case, the designer is a really good friend of mine and a superb designer called Preeti Rajwade. Preeti lives in Bangalore, and we've always worked long distance, even before this COVID thing. And it is she who puts my illustrations together and gives it those touches that make it special. So those little motifs on top of the text, Preeti said to me, Deepa, I need something there. Do me a few motifs and I will put them there. And she said, I'm going to put these sort of borders there. So we work together, of course. I mean, it's a give and take. But without Preeti's inputs, without her design sense, and without her layout sense, her decision on what kind of fonts to use, on where the pictures should overlap and where they should recede, and all that. This is what makes a print story really special. And I think we do not give the designers credit enough. So this is my tribute to the wonderful Preeti Rajwade, a dear friend of mine, who has collaborated with me on a number of books. Um, and she did work on both these books with me. Unfortunately, with most books, see in the bucket also, it was Preeti's idea to have this swirl of the river going all the way around on the end paper. She said, Deepa, what fun it would be if we did this. And I said, yes. And the wonderful thing is we worked so long together. Preeti and I know exactly what each one is saying, or what each one means when the other talks. And so it works. We never have to explain things too much to each other. It was Preeti's slight, this is the genius of Preeti. She takes a cue from the way the picture goes. And so in every frame, there is some text that is askew and some text that is straight. You will see it on every single page, although you will not see it, you will not notice it until I mention it to you. This is the river that flows to the lake that holds the water. It's like the river. It's like the river. It flows and it's askew. It's not straight. But this is the lake, and usually, I mean, we have man-made lakes and all that. So so that becomes the straight portion of it. On every page, she is able to draw your eyes into things, and this is what a good designer does. Unfortunately, as artists, and I don't know whether this is true all around the world, we do our illustrations and we hand them in to the publisher, and the publisher takes care of the design and the layout. And very often we have nothing to do with it, and we have no interaction with the person doing the designing. But when there is a melding, when there is a connection, and when the designer and artist work together, you bring out something that is so satisfying and so good. So I wanted to show these two stories to you that were brought out by Eklavya. So now, while I was working, because we had come in touch with these two publishing houses, I got to know people, right? And Tulika approached me and they said, look, are there any stories of your own that you'd like to come out with? We have these Abacus stories, and Tulika published one or two of them. But one of them, really nice one called Samir's House. This is Samir's House. But Radhika asked me and she said, do you have any stories of your own that you'd like to publish? And I said, gosh, I never thought of it that way, but let me think. And I did. One night the story came to me and I wrote it down. And the next morning I read it and it seemed to make sense. So I put it, I worked on it, put it aside, worked on it again a couple of days later. And then I sent it to them and they approved of the story. And I set about doing the illustrations. And this turned out to be a book called The Seed. So The Seed is a very simple book. It is a bilingual book, so it's there in 2 languages. It was brought out in English, and along with English, one of 8 other languages. So it was there in Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Gujarati, and I don't know what else. So anyway, the premise of The Seed was very simple. There's a little girl who finds a seed and she has no idea what it is. But she's thrilled to see the seed, and she finds a discarded pot, and she finds some mud. She puts the mud in, she plants the seed in, and she gives it water and she gives it sunshine and she waits. And she's thrilled when a couple of days later, a little seedling sprouts. And she's so happy, she's overwhelmed with joy. And she takes it to different people in her family to show them the seedling. And everybody wants to know what it is, what it's going to be. Is it going to be a tree? Is it going to be a bush? Is it going to have flowers? Is it going to have fruit? Is it going to be a big tree? Is it going to be a small thing? And she doesn't know because she just found the seed. She has no idea what it's going to be. And she says, I don't know. I really don't know what it's going to be. But she's planted it. So she continues watering it. She protects it with a plate from below. She puts it with other plants for company. She talks to it. She plays with it. And it starts giving out more shoots. And at the end, she says, it doesn't matter. So of course, this book, everybody who's seen this book has come up to me with different interpretations of the book. I've had people come up and say, oh, this is a lovely book about relationships. And it is. It's got various relationships in the family. It's also about how to grow, encouraging children to grow a plant. But more than that, it's about unconditional love and support. And we all know that in our country, as soon as children are able to talk almost, people keep asking, what are you going to be when you grow up? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be an engineer? Are you going to be like your father? Are you going to work like your mother? Your older brother did very well in school. You better do very well in school because he set a record for you. And the message of this book for those who understand it is that it really doesn't matter. If we love our children and we give them the unconditional love and support and the environment in which to blossom, they will blossom and become the best of whatever they can be. And that's our job. That's what we need to do. So it doesn't matter whether that plant grows into a tree or a bush or a creeper or a vine. It doesn't matter whether our children become doctors or chefs or painters or take up whatever else they want to do, become farmers, grow things, nurture things, clean the city. It doesn't matter. Our job is to give them the love and support that they need. So this was the seed. I'm not showing all the books that I have published, but a few that have meant a lot to me. So Lavanya, I'm just wondering, should I allow, I'm getting a bit bored listening to my own voice. Should I take questions in between or wait till the end? Or if somebody wants to ask something, should we allow that? Or if you...
Typically, I think if you could finish, and it's a lot easier if people leave their questions in the chat box. So we have a session of question and answers at the end.
All right. And you let me know if you're getting bored.
No one's bored. I assure you, we're not bored.
Okay, perfect. So the next book I'd like to highlight is called The Lonely King and Queen. And this is a story really about adoption. And so it talks about a handsome king and a beautiful queen. And now, usually when you think about a king and queen, there are certain preconceived notions about what they look like and what they wear and where they live. So my king and queen are really very, very ordinary people. And the only thing that tells you that they're kings and queens are a king and queen, are the little crowns on top of their head. So, and you'll understand why this is so. So this king and queen are very happy. They have lots of friends and they both work and they share the housework and they both go out to work and they have full lives, but sometimes they feel lonely. And one day the king and queen are sitting and talking and the queen says, I don't know why, but sometimes I feel a little bit lonely. And the king says, I know what you mean. And just as they're both sighing and feeling a little bit sorry for themselves, they hear somebody call out to them. They can't make out what the voice is saying. They can't make out where it's coming from. but they both hear a voice calling out to them at the same time. So the queen immediately looks underneath the bed, and so does the king. And the queen has to sort of hold on to her crown to make sure it doesn't roll off her head. But there's nobody underneath the bed. So they look inside the almirah, inside the cupboard, and they pull out the drawers, but there's nobody calling to them from the cupboard. That's strange, they say, because they can still hear the voice. So the queen rushes into the living room and she pulls all the cushions of all the chairs, and the king looks into the plants, but there's nobody calling out to them from there. And they look in the pots and pans and in the bathroom. And as you can see, uh, this is not a palace in the usual sense. It is a small Bombay house. And so they look all over the palace, everywhere, but they cannot see who is calling out to them, nor can they hear what is being said. So the king and queen sit down for a cup of tea and wonder what to do next. When suddenly the queen says, "Do you know, I think this voice is coming from outside." So they drop their cups of tea and they rush out, and the voice is a bit louder. They still can't hear what it's saying, but the voice is a bit louder. So they rush to the gate and they look down the road, and the king says, "You know what? I think it's coming from that direction." So they leave the house and they start following the voice. And they go up and down a few roads and climb up a couple of hills, and they wade across a few streams, few mishaps along the way, and then there are some delays because there's a wedding party that blocks the road, and some cows that decide to park themselves right in the middle. So there are delays and there are stoppages along the way, but they continue following the sound of the voice until finally they come to a house, a yellow house, and they hear the voice, which is much louder now, but they still don't know exactly what it's saying. So they enter the house, and there's a kind woman there, and they say, "Was a voice calling out to us from here?" And the woman says, "Yes, I think you are being called to." And she hands them a little baby, and they realize that this baby was calling out to them and calling them by name, calling them Papa and Mama. So they bring the little baby home, and they're not lonely anymore. So this story about adoption really, but I wanted to say two things. Firstly, that adoption is just another way in which a family comes together. Just as you can have a biological child, you can adopt a child, but the minute that child comes home, that child completes your family, and it's your family. So uh, it's just another way that a family comes together. Secondly, your child calls out to you. That child is meant for you. And because every child has the right to be a prince or princess in their own homes, that's who they are in their own homes. This makes their parents the king and queen. So within your own home, the child is the prince or the princess. And by default, you become the king and queen. So this was the Lonely King and Queen, my story on adoption. I'll show you a couple of other stories now that I want to, but before that, maybe I'll give you 2 minutes of my face. Yeah, hi. So there was a bit of a lot of screen sharing. So I want to show you a couple of other books that I brought out. This Lonely King and Queen is again from Tulika, and I'm going to show you a couple of the more interesting books that have been done. I notice, because I work a lot with children, I notice that when you're dealing with very young children, often they're not interested in the first page and the first line and all that. The children, babies open the book to any page and they say, "Read, tell me what it says." And so they're not interested in right from the beginning to the end, but they just might open to any page and want you to start the story from there. Secondly, once a child is hooked on a story, he or she wants to hear the story again and again and again and again and again. So I said, why shouldn't I develop a set of stories that are like that have no end? and can start at whatever place you choose. So I brought out a set of three little stories which were brought out in this little jacket, and they called Rounded Round books. So these stories revolve around a central axis. Okay, so I knew what I wanted to do, but the person who developed this design is another fantastic book designer called Aditi Babel. So Aditi Babel took an idea that I had, refined it, and it was she who put together this book design. So oh, sorry, upside down. There is no first page to this book. You can start on any page, and the story itself is cyclical. So it goes on and on and on, no matter which page you choose. So I'm going to show you up close the designs for one of them. This story is called The Egg. So it's about an egg which hatches, and the chick comes out and starts eating and feeding and grows up into a hen, and the hen lays an egg, sits down, lays an egg, and the egg hatches, and the story goes on and on and on. So there were two more in this. I'm going to show you the illustrations for the second one, and this is called what's it called? Oh, the bath. This is called the bath. So this cyclical story has this little girl who heads out all nice and clean, heads out with her cat to the garden, and she says bye-bye to her mother. And she goes into the garden, and they're having a lovely time running, playing. And as children do, she gets really, really filthy. And she comes home covered in mud and leaves and looking like children do at the end of a fun session of play. So her mother takes her to the bathroom, gives her a bath, and puts her into her clean clothes and does up her hair again. And the little girl heads out, says bye-bye to her mother, and heads out to her garden again. So this cyclical book is like this. Okay, so this is the page I'm starting it at, where the little girl comes home all dirty, and her mother says, oh no, and takes her for a bath, and she does her up nicely, puts on clean clothes, combs her hair, and the little girl says bye-bye to her mother, heads out to the garden again, where she and her cat play and get dirty and come home and have a bath again. So there were 3 books in this series, and unfortunately, I don't think these books did very well for some strange reason. I think when parents decide to buy books for children, they like structured books that follow a pattern, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So anyway, I just wanted to show you these because I personally was delighted by these books, and I thought that a lot of care had been put in by Aditi Babel on designing the framework of the books, and they were produced really nicely. So they should have had more viewers. Right, next. Lavanya, you will have to tell me when I am falling short of time, all right?
Yeah, we have plenty of time. We have another half an hour.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, so now I want to go on to another project that Preeti, my good friend Preeti, and I did, and this was textbooks. So these were workbooks and textbooks for, they were sponsored by UNICEF for Jharkhand. Yes, for the Jharkhand government. And it was to teach concepts and mathematical concepts in a fun way. So we decided that the whole thing should be visual. So this picture was really teaching concepts of close and far, up and down, inside, outside, small and big. So it was it enabled the teacher to talk about all these various concepts while looking at a picture. So the whole idea of this book was to provide visual um, stimulus and make it fun. So, so for instance, you see the rat caught inside the trap, and it says, "Pinjre ke andar kya hai?" Ghade ke bahar kya hai? So the children look at the picture and they decide what is inside and what is outside, and um, what is inside and outside, and what is on top of and what is below, and what is up and what is down, and things like that. So basically it was just trying to make learning really, really fun. So I'm just showing you 2 chapters in this. This was counting. So for counting, we had all these children with balls and birds, and they had to count things. फलों की संख्या. So basically making addition and subtraction a fun process. All right. So that was for UNICEF for the government of Jharkhand. Now the government of Chhattisgarh also had given UNICEF this project to do, which is very, very interesting. And it was to teach children language, Hindi, but through storybooks rather than through one single textbook. So they had devised 50 different stories, 50 storybooks to cover the entire year. So each child would get 50 storybooks, and all these stories were written in a graded fashion by the teachers themselves. And they were wonderful stories, I have to tell you. And they were written in a graded fashion. So the earliest stories started with very simple words, without any nuktas, without any matras, without any oo and ahs and e's and all that, and then progressed to two line and 3 line sentences, which were complete sentences with all the matras and all the oos and all the uchars and all the timber and whatnot and everything. So, so I'm going to show you, this was number 4 in the series, and this is called Kajal. And this is how they operated. So at the bottom, you see certain letters. These are the letters that are being introduced. And there's also an A ki matra that is introduced. Okay. So there's a story, and the main picture, that side is what the children read. Kajal kala kala, KG ka kajal kala. So Keja ka kajal kala. Keja is the aunt. And on the left-hand side, there's a little bit more of a description given. Now that's not meant to be read by the children at all. That is read by the teacher or a grown-up. And it tells the story behind what the child reads. So that is the complete story. It also acts as an incentive for the children to read later. Okay. So what the children read is this: Kajal kala kala. Keja ka kajal kala. So you learn that Keja is an aunt who's come from the city to this child's house in the village, and she's putting on the kajal, and the child is fascinated by the kajal. And because she's fascinated by the kajal, she asks her aunt whether she can borrow the kajal. Lata kajal laye, kajal se sajaye. So she wants the kajal not for herself, but because she wants to use it on her doll to make her doll pretty. So Keja, the aunt, gives her the kajal, and she discovers that putting on kajal is not such an easy job after all, and it gets smeared all over the doll's face and clothes and on her hands and all that. And then her brothers, who are like wicked brothers all over the world, can't stop laughing at her plight. So that is the simple story behind Kajal. I'm going to read you now the last story. Now, of the 50 books, I did 10 of them. And the other 40 were given out to, there were some, I think 8 or 9 artists who worked on this job. And so there were other artists who did other books. I did 10 of them. So that Kajal was the 4th book in the series. This is the 50th book in the series. That means the last one. It's called Nyanu Ka Mitra. Now you have the U, you have I, you have all that, and you have the letter sh and th and everything included. So Jnanu ka mitra, Jnanu ka mitra, sorry, my tongue is not behaving today, is about the friendship between a crocodile and a monkey. And the bandar Jnanu decides to have a bath, and he sits on what he thinks is a stone in the middle of the lake, and he soaps himself all over. And then suddenly, oh, there are 2 pages missing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Suddenly, he's all covered in suds, and the stone tips over. And when the stone tips over, he realizes that it's not a stone at all, but it is a turtle. And then he jumps onto his friend's back, Mangu, and Mangu brings him safely back to shore. So it's not an evil story about a crocodile eating a bandar. It's a friendship between a crocodile and a bandar, and what happens to them. So now here there are no directions, there are no side stories for the parent to read out, because at this stage now the child is reading the entire sentence for himself or herself. And it's just simple 2-word things. It was a wonderful series that was brought out, and it was great fun doing the illustrations for it. What was even more fun was the fact that because I was one of many artists who were doing the illustrations, I realized that I could experiment with the art styles, with illustration styles. I didn't need to stick to one, because anyway the children were going to see illustrations done by so many different artists. So I said, why should all 10 of mine look the same? And so this Jnanuka Mitra, I did entirely with sketch pens. So the whole thing was colored with sketch pens, drawing sketch pens and well-working ones and all that. And this earlier one was done with inks. Kajal was done with inks. So in each of the 10 ones, I was able to explore something different, and in that sense, give the children something new to look at, and at the same time, do a little bit of exploration myself. A second very interesting and wonderful feature about these books was that before each book was introduced to a child, the teacher introduced them to something called a conversation chart. And a conversation chart was basically a poster which touched upon the topic that was going to be explored in the book. So it increased their vocabulary and helped them talk and be natural before they, got into the tension of having to read. And so it put all children at their ease. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to show you some of the posters that I developed to accompany the various stories. Now, so there was one story called Lal Chashma, Neela Chashma. It was about these little goggles that you get in the fair, and when you put on, you see the world in different colors. So for that, I did this entire fair scene. Let me just pull it down so you can see the whole thing. Yeah. So these are A3 size posters, and what the teacher does is she gets the children to talk about what they see in the poster. So they chat about who's doing what to whom, and who's teasing whom, and who's sitting in which ride, and who's eating what, and who's playing kasti and whatnot, and who's trying on the bangles. And in the process, they learn new words and they develop a better vocabulary. They learn things that they didn't know before, and it prepares them for some of the words that are going to come up in the book. So when they encounter them in the book, they've already been exposed to them. So this was the poster with, I'm not sure it was called Chashma, but something like that. Okay, So this style was a completely different style that I adopted. This was entirely digital. So I just did a black and white outline and I colored it entirely with flat colors on the computer itself. And this went with a story called Jahaz. So Jahaz was a story about a little boy who, and it's raining outside, and he makes a paper boat and he floats it in the stream, in the rainwater stream that is running outside his house. And so to accompany it, this was the poster that was made. And this poster, of course, exposes the children to various kinds of jahaz, and it talks about what happens on at the docks. And I purposely chose what I thought would be a sort of a Bombay-ish scene that would happen at Bhausa Dakka or Sassoon Dock or something, so that children from another place could get a flavor of what happens in a seaside place like this. So this style was entirely different. Now, the four pictures that I've chosen all show completely different styles. So it gives you an idea of what fun I had developing different things. So now this one, I used entirely cut paper. It was just paper that I cut and I placed one on top of the other and I composed the whole picture and then I took a photograph of it. I didn't have Preeti helping me with this, I think. So that's why I have this problem with this red line comes over the flower. If Preeti had noticed, oh, Preeti was on this. Okay, sorry. Anyway, I think this is before she did her job on it. So, so this was entirely cut paper, and this project gave me the opportunity to try out absolutely wonderful different things, and this was about tiny things. So it was about insects in the jungle, and this is the poster that went with Nyanuka Mitra.
An option comes a call over the internet. Or...
Somebody is talking. Okay, so now this is the poster that went with Nyanuka Mitra. Nyanuka Mitra, as you know, is about the friendship between the crocodile and the monkey. So this poster that I did along with that is all about friendship. So what you see in this poster is friendship of different sorts. You have old men sitting and laughing together. You have a gaggle of women. You have dogs that are friends. You have children on their father's shoulders who are friends. You have somebody bringing moongfali and giving it to his grandmother as a gesture of friendship. You have children playing. You have a friendship between a man and a dog, and also between cats and dogs and birds and all that. So this was just showing different forms of friendship, but it also showed, it enabled the teacher to talk to the children about other things, such as, what do you think the season is here? Why do you think it is that particular season? Is this what people do when they're cold? Do they sit around a fire? Does eating hot moongfalis help when the season is cold outside? So it enables a good teacher to carry on an entire conversation with children and helps them, gives them confidence in talking, in sharing, in learning new words in a non-threatening way, because there's no right and wrong. There is no, you have to give this particular answer to this. So there were 10 posters again to go with the 10 stories, and I've showed you 4 of them. So now, before we get to the next, I'm going to a little bit of a break again and let you see my cobra. So now I'm going to get to a book that has been spoken about by Lavanya, and it is a book that I have done recently. It came out in 2018 December. So really January 2019 is when it came out. The Tata Trusts have an initiative called the Parag Initiative, and the Parag Initiative sponsors and promotes books for children. It doesn't publish itself, but it agrees to sponsor books so that publishers can take up projects that they may not otherwise have taken up. So I was approached by the Parag Trust and said, we're deciding to sponsor a set of big format books, large books, which, for very, so this is Nani's Walk to the Park. It's an A3 size book. And I think some of you may have seen this. So the whole idea, the premise behind this book was familiarizing. My firm belief is when you get to know people, discrimination and boundaries and all that disappear. When you get to know people, you start seeing them not as stereotypes and not as labels, but you start seeing them as people that you recognize and can identify with and with whom you have commonalities. So Nani's Walk to the Park is a simple book. As I said, Parag Initiative got in touch with me and they said, would you like, we're thinking of bringing out some large format books. So would you like to write some stories? So I did. I submitted 3. 2 of them were finally made into books. And Nani's Walk to the Park was the one that I wrote and illustrated. The second one, Achu, was about the animals in an Indian forest and how things are not always what they seem to be. And that was illustrated by this really talented young artist from Bangalore called Nancy Raj. So anyway, Nani's Walk to the Park, to get back to it, is a simple story about a Nani who goes to the park once a week. And this particular week, her grandson decides to join her. And she tells him that she takes a long route to the park. And he says he doesn't mind. And in the process of going to the park, she takes him around the community that they live in and introduces the community to him through new eyes, because she has renamed all the roads around her neighborhood with names that make sense to her, with names that talk about her relationship to the community, and with names that talk about what is important or what should be important in our lives. So I'm going back to sharing now. And then what I'll do is, I thought it might interest some of you to share with you the process of creating this book. So I'm sharing the screen again. Share screen. Yep, where does it go? There it is. Share. Right. So Nani's Walk to the Park. I'll enlarge it a bit. Maybe a bit bigger. Yeah. Okay. So there's also. So there's Nani setting out for the park with her grandson, and when she sets out, the grandson says, Nani, you're going the wrong way. The park is not that way. The park is this way. And Nani says, yes, but this is the route I take. So please bear with me. And if you want to come with me, you'll have to come by my route. We're going to go first through the Lane of Treasures. Now, this little boy happens to be about 6 years or 7 years old, and he's never heard of the Lane of Treasures. And but he realizes that when they enter the market, why his grandmother has called it the Lane of Treasures, because we all know that our Indian marketplaces are just so chock full of anything and everything that you need. So from foodstuffs to clothes to high-end quality goods to jewelry, everything is available. So in the market, Nani picks up 2 packets of milk and she asks Venki, which is the name of her grandson, to pick up a bag of samosas, and they proceed to the Lane of Beauty. The Lane of Beauty is where men and women are working together on making godadis. So they take people's old material and stitch them together and make wonderful godadis. The samosas are given to be shared among the people who are working, and Nani picks up a godadi that she has paid for, and in that godadi, Venki can see a scrap of his mother's kurta and a scrap of his grandmother's sari. So they pick that up and then they enter the lane of happiness. The lane of happiness is actually a very dull and dirty and dismal sort of lane. It's a tiny narrow lane behind a theater and in front of some warehouses. And Venki wonders why it could be the lane of happiness until his grandmother starts calling out, and dogs and cats emerge from everywhere, from every nook and cranny and crevice and kachra dabba. They all come forward, and Nani pours out the milk that she has made and feeds all the animals there. And after they eat, they crowd around Venki, and he doesn't want to leave this lane. And Nani reminds him that there are many more wonderful things to see on their way to the park, and they go further. The next lane they visit is the lane of Venki calls it the lane of noise, but Nani's description for it is the lane of mischief, because it's where the children are being children in their free time. It's the break time. And it reminds her of not only when Venki was, Venki and his friends, but it also reminds her of when she was a child. So there's Nani doing a little bit of hopscotch. And speaking of when she was a child, the next lane is one that is rather precious to her because she calls it the lane of friendship, and it's where her dear friend lives. So this is a lady rather, who was a child with Nani. They grew up together, they got married, they had families, and now they've grown old together. So Nani spends some time with her friend, and when she's leaving, she drapes the godadi around her, the quilt that she had got in the lane of beauty. She drapes it around her friend, and her friend gives her a bag of breadcrumbs to take. The next lane is the lane of dreams. The lane of dreams is full of booksellers. At one time, when I was in college, when I was in JJ, the entire footpath around Hutatma Chowk was full of booksellers selling the most wonderful books, and you didn't need to be rich to buy books. And this is the kind of mood and the evocation that I wanted this frame to show. I also have a nod to the Asiatic Library and Kitab Khana, which so sadly got burnt a few days ago. And my hero, somebody whom I think everybody should know about, the statue in the middle, is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, for whom books were so important. So this is the lane of dreams. Here, Nani picks up a book for Venki, and then they proceed to the second last road, which is the lane of magic. And how could we have a street without trees? So in this street are all the beautiful, wonderful trees that we see around us, the laburnum, the gulmohar, the jarul, and they're shedding their flowers so that the whole street looks like a magic carpet, and it's so much cooler underneath the trees. With this lane, they finally come to the entrance to the park. And Nani and Venki enter the park, where she gives him a book, which he sits and reads. And Nani falls asleep under the tree, and she opens the bag of breadcrumbs that her friend is given for the birds to peck at. And after a while, Venki looks up at his Nani and he thinks of, this long journey that they've taken to the park. And he says, Nani, can I come with you next week too? And she says, yes. So there's Nani giving her grandson a hug because she has conveyed some of her love for her community to him. And in the end, they set off home together, but accompanying them now is a little cat. So for children who want to know where the cat came from, they will have to go back through the various pages and discover at what point the cat decided to join Nani, and at what point Nani and Venki decided that this cat has chosen them and therefore needs to go home with them. So this was the idea of Ooh, okay, of Nani's walk to the park, but that's not the end of it. Nani's walk to the park ends with a poster. And this poster at the very end, after you see Nani walking away, this poster has all the frames joined together, showing you Nani's entire route and walk to the park. In fact, showing Nani's entire neighborhood. And when you put it together, you realize that Nani's house to the park is just a matter of crossing the road. But Nani has taken a walk around the entire poster, her entire neighborhood, in order to come to the park. And when you examine it even further, you realize that there are things connecting different frames that you don't see when you see one frame at a time. So that was Nani's walk to the park. When I tell this story to children in schools, I have a giant poster. It's huge, and there's a sense of awe because anyway, each frame contains hundreds of people. I mean, literally, there are about anything between 100 to 150 people in each frame, each of them doing different things, each of them interacting with each other in different ways. There are many side stories to tell. The frame of happiness, which has the dogs and cats, also has a cinema theater. And so let me quickly get into the process. Before I started, in fact, I started with the poster. So if I can just show it to you here, because I wanted the whole idea of the community first, this was the first thing I worked on. This entire huge poster with every frame linked to the other frames. So I put together the large poster first, so I would know how each frame connected to the other. This is 9 A3 sheets connected. And this is how big the poster is when I show it to the children in school. So let me just show it to you. So this is what I worked on first. Without this large poster, the story would have lost much of its charm and much of its value. So I started with that. And then what I did was I separated out 3 frames at a time, connecting frames. So I knew that what I was doing in one connected with the 2 frames that were closest to it. And that is how I worked at them frame after frame after frame. As for the pictures themselves, okay, so these are all the illustrations that I have done for the frames. And on each page, I worked on individual little parts of it. So there's the bookshop, there's Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's statue. Similarly, here is a page with people from the park doing all sorts of things, and the cupola where the yoga is taking place. Here are a couple of buildings that you will see, the stonework buildings that you see around Fort. This was part of the frame of the Lane of Beauty, where the Godadis are being made. Here's Paradise Cinema. So as you can imagine, there are, in some of the things, I even used bits of paper and collage work and all sorts of things. And then what I did was I scanned all these pages, separated out each of the elements and put them together. Anyway, so for those of you who are interested, I mean, I just wanted to show you how all the illustrations were done, each of the individual godadis. So each godadi was a piece of paper that I cut and I put on. So the trees and okay, yeah, lots more. So as I said, this entire all of them are illustrations for that, which were then put together for the others. I want to show you a share screen. Let me show you. Okay, so just so this is to give you an idea of how big that poster is. I have my guardian of my drawings who oversees all my work. And this is how I put together that initial poster and then separated it out into different screens and then saw where the overlap is and what needed to be added to each one in order to put it together. So that's it. They're just a couple of frames which I wanted to show you earlier, and this is for a book called One and Many, which I illustrated, which I had not written. So, and for this I used only inks. Okay, so I think I should stop sharing and maybe just we can take some questions now. Okay, so I wanted to maybe while the questions are coming in, I wanted to share a couple of things with people. Firstly is that as I grow older, I find that there's such a wealth of talent around me that it's sometimes wiser to see what's happening around and not be so keen on producing things yourself. I find that I learn more by listening rather than talking. So today, in fact, has been very strange because I have learned absolutely nothing new through the course of this entire talk. And it would have been wonderful if I had. So as I grow older, I realize that silence and listening to people is better than talking oneself. That's one thing. Secondly, I've realized that there's so many books in the world. There are books being produced all the time. Unless I have something that's really worthwhile and really important to say, the world doesn't need another tree cut down. And so I work very selectively now, and I work only if I feel that I have learned to mistrust what I'm saying more and more, because it doesn't seem that it seems like I have much more to learn than I have to share. So that is the second thing. The third thing, which has been evolving, I think, from the time of my work with Abacus and through all the work that I've done, is that we need to nurture and take care of relationships in our environment. And we need to save and reuse and recycle in every way that we can. So I'm just going to share a few tips because my latest love right now is papier-mâché. And those of you who follow my Instagram feed will find that I've been doing, it started off with the simplest of stuff. One of the very first things that I made was given to Lalita, who for her son Rehan. And since then I've evolved a bit. And so for me now, making things out of waste is very, very important. It's important for me to recycle, to reuse things. And Lalita is showing the little boy that I made for her son Rehan. Anyway, so I want to show you. So these are all things that are made entirely out of waste. So this is my series of cacophonous birds. And these are made entirely from waste material. If I have a waste material that can be used, that's what I do. The wings and all are made from pet food bags, which come in really strong foil plastic bags. And it seems such a shame to waste them that I cut them up and I use them for all sorts of things like wings and anything that needs to be pliable. The rest of it is all newspaper and newspaper. This is something that I'm really keen on learning more of. This is my wise mouse. So I made a series of mice. Again, everything is made of discarded stuff. I am like a maniac in the house. My daughter has to keep throwing away things because I keep rummaging in the kachra dabba and picking them out. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that I can do, which I think others can very easily do as well. Sorry. So, when I use paints, and particularly if I'm using acrylic paints, when there's a little bit of leftover paint, I just dab it on paper. Okay, so this book is entirely full of waste paint because I don't want to flush it down the drain, and especially acrylic paints which have a plastic base. It just seems such a environmentally unfriendly thing to do. So I scrape every little bit that I can and I put them on pieces of paper, which I save for collage work. So it could be, and I build up layers and layers and make all sorts of textures with paint brushes, with my fingers, whatever. So, and these are always used later on. I cut them up and use them for collages and for pictures and all sorts of things. So that is one thing. And the second thing, of course, all the forks and spoons that come with takeaway things and the dabbas and all that are definitely not thrown away. But I also do something which many of you will laugh at. These are the pens that I use for most of my drawings. It's a Uniball Signo. I use the Uniball Signo, which is my go-to pen, and I do all my drawings with that, and I do it. And after and I have a pen, and I just buy the refills. And when the ink is over, this is what I do. I take off the top, and I blow it through because there's gel there, and I wash it. And these make superb straws. They're hard and they can be used for any sort of craft work. So I have a box full of these wonderful straws, which I use in my papier-mâché. I use them for legs. I use them for hands. I use them for all sorts of body parts and to make holes and to all sorts of things, to make hedgehogs. And I use this because it's a superb thing, so I don't throw away refills. I also keep the tops, which I can use as spikes and spines and all sorts of things. So if you come to my house and if you open any drawer, you'll see all sorts of odds and ends, which may look very strange, but I assure you, they all have a job. Foil, in which my mother sometimes sends up chapatis. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how that foil is looked after. Once, my dog decided that my daughter had got a roll of toilet paper for something, and I keep a roll in the house because sometimes if my dog or my cat has an accident, then I needed to wipe up their susu or potty. So my dog found the toilet roll and decided to play with it, and the cat decided to join in. And so they had half shredded the toilet roll before I found it, and it was strewn all over the house. And I collected up every tiny little bit, which I use for my papier-mâché. Okay, so let me show you one last thing. one of the first things that I made was when I was traveling by train, and this wonderful woman was sitting in front of me, and I decided that I just had to capture her face. So, so this was one of the earlier papier-mâché things that I had done. I mean, it's amazing. I think that the medium itself is fantastic. It's friendly. It's environmentally friendly. It's wonderful. And my dream now is to actually go and learn traditional papier-mâché from groups that are working on it, and find ways to reduce even the little bit of modern conveniences that I am using now. Fevicol, for instance, trying to find ways to replace the Fevicol with non-food glues. I don't want to replace it with atta. I mean, I don't want to replace it with something that people eat. And I don't want to waste food in that way, but to find other ways to replace it into things. So I think my next phase in life as I grow older is to go back to studying, to go and learn and apprentice myself and study. So that's it. I guess I should end here and not talk more. Oh my goodness, it's 12:55. That means I've taken more time than it should have, right? Sorry.
That's all right. We've had a fantastic time. Any questions? If you could put your questions into the chat box, then we can have a quick session of question answers.
I'm really sorry. I didn't realize I had taken up so much time.
Not at all. There was a question early on about papier-mâché, which you have answered beautifully.
Okay.
Any other questions? In fact, Deepa, I'm going to share the comments with you because there is so much appreciation and love. You must read the comments. So I'm going to collect all of those and send them to you for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and thank you everybody for taking all this time to out of a busy Saturday morning, and for so long. I mean, for so long, almost 2 hours. So thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm really, I didn't expect people to come.
One question, how long did Nani's walk to the park take you from concept to end?
From the writing of the story to the last frame, it took me 4 months. So, which is not much time when one speaks of books I mean, one should be able to work longer, but it took me 4 months. Yeah. And 4 months of full day work. So morning to night, I would really be at it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's sending in love and interesting comments. Really, thank you so much.
I guess that's it then. There don't seem to be any more questions. Thank you so much, Deepa. This has been a fabulous session. I know I enjoyed myself. And
thank you, Lavanya. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone who joined in. And I hope to see you all at our next Artist Spotlight session. Thanks once more.
Absolutely. Lavanya, when is the next one, by the way?
I don't have a date yet, but there's always one every month.
Every month.
I will keep you posted on the date as soon as we fix one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.